The Bcn Liberation Triangle. Black Christian nationalism seeks to change society in order to accomplish the liberation of black people and realizes that we as a people are engaged in a struggle for power and for our survival. We utilize the Bcn Liberation Triangle as a godly symbol to Kasanyawatu and bring black people together to create oneness and unity amongst our people, to build a nation within a nation, where we control our own institutions that governs our lives. The Liberation Triangle is a symbol of Cleage, where we voluntarily tax ourselves to fund the black nation, and is the financial basis of building a nation. The Liberation Triangle is also a symbol of Kazi, which is communal work and responsibility, where we collectively work together on a common program that's designed to liberate the African diaspora from the oppression, exploitation, and brutality of our colonial oppressors. Through Kasanyawatu, Cleage, and Kazi, we will once again build the kingdom of heaven on earth for our people throughout the African diaspora. As black Christian nationalists all over the world, we pledge to let the power of the Liberation Triangle work its wonders in us, to take the power of the Liberation Triangle to African people across the world. May God and the black nation be our witness that we exist to take black Christian nationalism to black people everywhere.
This morning, begin a series of 4 sermons dealing with basically you are the answer, dealing with the responsibilities that individual black people have in these critical times. The leaflet said the only solution to the black man's problem is escape from powerlessness and exploitation through the practice of communalism, that is sharing. And you are the answer, and it's not enough to sing the blues while seeking individualistic escape. The handwriting is on the wall. This nation has been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Babylon is falling. That's taken from Daniel 5:17-28. You are the answer. The scripture from the book of Daniel is an interesting scripture. Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, he's the distant ancestor of the grocery men around the corner. He was having a big party, a big feast. And he had called 1,000 of his noblemen together and had all his wives and concubines and dancing girls and everybody there. And the height of the feast, he thought he could add a little touch of splendor to the feast, and he told the servants to go get the gold and silver goblets that had been stolen from the temple in Jerusalem when his father Nebuchadnezzar had invaded and conquered Jerusalem. And so they went and got the divine goblets, the goblets which had been consecrated for God in use in the temple. And they drank and were having a great time at the feast, when suddenly a hand appeared on the wall behind Belshazzar, writing, "Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin." And the king was frightened at the hand that appeared from nowhere, writing on the wall a message that he could not understand. And so he asked his wise men, his magicians, and those who are important at such moments of crisis, tell him what it meant, and they couldn't figure it out. And so eventually they sent for Daniel, who was of the black nation Israel and who was in captivity and had a great reputation for being able to decipher dreams and other mysteries. And he came, and the king promised him great riches if he would just decipher the handwriting on the wall. And Daniel said he didn't need the riches, he could keep them, and he didn't need the position, he could keep it, but he would be happy to translate the writing on the wall. And so he tells him in detail about his father's wickedness, which caused God to take him from the throne and take away his mind for a period until he became humble and was willing to accept the power of God. And then he said, you're doing the same thing. That your arrogance and your denial of God and your unwillingness to accept the realities of the world and of God's power means that your nation now, Babylon, has been weighed in the balance and found wanting. And the nation will be divided among the Medes and the Persians. So the country is to be destroyed. Well, Belshazzar didn't know whether to be happy or sad, but he still gave Daniel the robes and everything that he had promised and made him third man in the kingdom. And then the next day, the nation was invaded and conquered, and Belshazzar was defeated and killed. Now, it's easy to see the story. A nation has flaunted God deliberately, using the sacred vessels from the temple in Jerusalem for a raucous feast. And so God destroys the nation. But it's a much bigger story than just the nation of Babylon. But one thing that's interesting, it's very difficult for an oppressed people not to identify with their oppressor. And in some strange way, Daniel managed not to identify with his oppressor. The Babylonians and the kings, the noblemen, he came before them and he denounced the evil and the sinfulness which was to destroy Babylon. It's very difficult for an oppressed people, and we are an oppressed people here in America, although you may not want to admit it, to believe it, or to admit it out loud anyway, but we are an oppressed people. Black people in America are oppressed, shut out of all of the mainstream of American life, declared inferior, maintained in an inferior position, living in ghettos and bad housing, exploited everywhere we are. Black people in America are oppressed. Now, it may be difficult for you to admit the oppression because it strikes it somehow at your very feeble sense of self-worth. Because it's difficult to be oppressed and to accept your oppression if you have any sense of self-worth at all. So it's easier just to deny that it exists. We just like everybody else. We have good times and bad times, some good people and bad people, some have good jobs, some have bad jobs. It's easier to smooth it over and say we are not really oppressed. It's very difficult for an oppressed people not to identify with their oppressor and try to be like him, just like we try to be like white people. Not only to be like him, even to love him. You know how close you are to white people, how you feel close to them, and how there's nothing that they can really do that can sever the love ties that black people in America have for white people. We respect him, admire him, love him because he has power and we are powerless. Therefore, he controls what happens to us, our destiny. He's beautiful and we're ugly. We know that. It's obvious. He wouldn't be in his position if he was not the standard of beauty. So he's beautiful and we're ugly. He's powerful and we're powerless. He's beautiful and we're ugly. He has knowledge. All knowledge, we have ignorance. We don't know. Oppressed people try to be like him and even to love him. It's strange that Daniel in the Bible the book of Daniel could denounce the king of Chaldea, the behavior of the Babylonian people, as being opposed to the will of the God of Israel, because the God of Israel was the God of an oppressed people. Now, normally, if a people are oppressed, they would believe that somehow their God is responsible for their oppression because he didn't take them out of it. Because we expect a God to have power to do the things that we want him to do. But Daniel didn't denounce his God, he denounced Babylon in the name of the God of Israel and oppressed people. He refused the king's gifts and rewards, passed God's judgment on Babylon. It's peculiar in another sense. Not only did he somehow escape from identification with the Babylonians and the king, the power, the beauty, the knowledge of the Babylonians, somehow he didn't have the psychology of an oppressed people. Now, a real oppressed person, one who's really been sucked up by oppression, would have tried to hustle the king in that moment, wouldn't he? If the king offered him a robe and a third position, he would have demanded 2 robes and the second position and something else. He would have tried to hustle the king. He told me, I got this scoundrel now just where I want him. He would have tried to hustle the king, because the hallmark of an oppressed people is great skill at hustling. Y'all do know what I'm talking about. You hustle everybody. You hustle your oppressor, you hustle your mama, you hustle your daddy and your brother, your sister, the neighbor. You hustle everybody. And the tighter times get, the more committed we become to hustling. That's a mark of our oppression. Unoppressed people are hustling people. You can watch the people function and tell how oppressed they are by the ease of their pattern lifestyle, which has become a hustling lifestyle. Now, Daniel somehow had escaped the mark of oppression, because he didn't try to hustle the king. He said, I don't want your gifts, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen to you. And he denounced the king and denounced the king's father, told him exactly what was going to happen, and you're going to be overthrown. The nation is through. So he didn't try to hustle the king, but the king gave him what he said he was going to give him anyway, but it didn't last long, because the king was out of power. He was invaded the next day. And Chaldea, Babylon fell. It's always difficult for an oppressed people to face reality. That makes Daniel a very unique kind of person in history, because as an oppressed person, he was willing to deal with reality. It's true in the Old Testament. Many of the prophets and leaders of Israel, even though oppressed, maintained through their connection with God an escape somehow from the usual pattern of oppression. They didn't all turn into hustlers, although some did. So we look at what happened to the black nation Israel. We find that there were a lot of times when they did succumb to the fact that they were oppressed, couldn't face reality, tried to identify with their oppressor. The Hellenization of Israel, that's when the Greek influence, the great Greek culture, which the Greeks stole from Africa. The Hellenization of the Jews became almost ridiculous when the Jews who were under the influence of Greece tried so hard to be like the Greeks that even circumcision, which was a covenant relationship which the black nation Israel had with God, became distasteful to the black nation Israel. They said they wanted to wrestle in the nude out publicly as the Greeks did. And if they were different than the Greeks, then obviously there was something wrong with them. So they developed a very intricate kind of skin graft operation where they could get rid of their circumcision. You can explain that to those who don't know what circumcision is when y'all get out. But it was a very difficult operation. But they did it so that they could look like the Greeks when they wrestled in public as the Greeks wrestled. The concentration camps in Germany illustrate the same thing. The Jews in the concentration camps could be taken care of by very, very few Germans because they all identified and tried to help keep their brothers and sisters in subjection. They were part of the system of subjection because they had been changed by the very fact of their subjection. They tried to curry favor with the guards, do whatever they could to get an extra crumb of bread, a little scrap of meat, anything. And we see it in this country. Not too long ago, the poverty workers. You know, the government set up poverty programs all over the country, and there were certain grassroots poverty workers in every black community. They emerged, they had big mouths, they could talk loud, they could tap a meeting. And so they took over the poverty programs because the programs were set up in such a way that they had to have community representation. And so the poverty workers became the community representation and derived most of the benefits from the poverty program. Any of you during that period tried to get anything out the poverty program know that it all stopped with the poverty worker, the hustler. Hustling the poverty program. Now, one of the important things that you find difficult to accept, which you reject deliberately and will continue to reject no matter what I say here this morning, is the fact that America is through as a world power. I mean, you don't want to accept it, for one thing, and white folks are too smart to let it happen in the second place. And if you have to choose, you'll go along with white folks and their smartness, because they have demonstrated that over a long period of time, almost 400 years, ever since they brought us in slave ships to this country. We have been convinced that they are the smartest people in the world because we are enslaved to them. But America as a nation is about finished, as close to finished as Babylon was on the night that Daniel read the inscription that the hand wrote on the wall. You've been weighed in the balance and found wanting, and your nation will be destroyed. Now, America is finished. Now, that makes a big difference to how we look at reality and how we look at ourselves, how we look at our relationship with each other, how we look at our relationships with white people, the oppressor. If America is finished, doomed, then we would have to change many of the things that we do, that we are doing. Many of the attitudes that we have would have to be modified. We do not wish to accept the simple fact that America is doomed. We do not wish to change the attitudes that would have to be changed, the point of view that would have to be changed. We don't want to change anything. We want to believe that things are going to go on as they have been. So we are in a peculiar kind of situation, probably the most difficult kind of situation that black people have been in the black man's history. Difficult because the reality is obvious, and yet black people refuse to accept the reality. America is doomed for simple reasons. Nothing that we have done has doomed America, but what they have done has doomed America. America no longer is in the forefront of the industrial struggle, the production, manufacturing, research, development, all of the things that make a nation great industrially. America doesn't have anymore, because we've become a manufacturing nation concerned only with profit. So America, as a manufacturing nation, manufactures shabby goods. Whatever America manufactures will fall to pieces in a very limited length of time. The labor is the highest paid labor in the world, but it's labor that is not committed to building anything that's stable or substantial. That's because we are a part of the whole American psychology. The businessman who runs the factory is not concerned with putting out a product that's going to help anybody, just with the profit that he's going to make from the product. So the man who's boss, his attitude is reflected in the man who works on the line, the man who just tightens the little bolt. He doesn't tighten the bolt, and 1 million cars have to come back for recall, for reservicing. It doesn't make any difference to anybody because everybody's only concerned with profit. The businessman is only concerned because it costs him money when he calls cars back. The man on the line, including black men on the line, they don't care. They just want their wages, and they want them on time, and they want them to keep constantly going up. That's a part of the American way, the lifestyle of America, the standards of America. So America is really doomed. Other countries are far ahead of America industrially. Their production is superior to American production. All the talk that we hear about Japanese automobiles, we've got to stop letting them come into America, basically is racially motivated. Cars are coming in from everywhere, but the only ones we hear that have to be controlled are the Japanese imports. Because it really hurts America to have a non-white people able to outproduce them, to out-manufacture them, to outthink them, to outbuild them, to outdo everything that America has long prided itself on being first in being able to do. So America really is angry at the Japanese for outdoing them, but the Japanese are at least 100 years ahead of the United States now in plans that are just still on the drawing board that they haven't even put out. And almost everything that's sold in America is really manufactured in Japan or West Germany. Japan makes all the insides for the TVs, the radios, and other little gadgets, the electric clocks, all those things Japan manufactures. They may put them in a plastic box that's got American made stamped on it, but everything on the inside is made somewhere else. America is not competing industrially with the rest of the world. That's the reality. Now, if you can't compete industrially with the rest of the world, then your productivity is on the decline, and your exports are on the decline, your imports are increasing, and when your imports are greater than your exports, then you have to be sending out money every year to make up for the difference, billions of dollars. So America's dollar has almost no value because it goes down because the production is no good. Nobody wants to buy an American car, including America. Nobody wants to buy an American-made television, including Americans. So America is in a very difficult kind of situation. Now, you can say it doesn't really make that much difference. I don't care what happens to America. That could be true. You could be a captive on a ship, and the ship is hit by an iceberg and it's going to go down. And you there with chains on saying, I'm glad it's going down. Now, that makes sense. In a sense, you feel emotionally glad that something has happened to these people who got me in chains. But at the same time, when you realize that as that ship goes down, you're going to be one of the first ones and one of the most helpless ones as it goes down. Because not only are you on the ship, but you in chains on the ship. So as black people, we have a difficult time trying to deal with reality because we don't like reality. We don't like the situation that we're in. We would like to say we hope America does fall, but if America falls, we fall with it. When economics falls apart in America, who are the first ones fired? We are. When they quote statistics in the paper about unemployment, they don't include us, because our unemployment is way higher than any statistics that they quote, even the highest, most realistic statistics that they quote. Our unemployment is up to 40, 50%. Young people is over 60% already and still going up. And when they close a factory, it'll never open again. Not the way it was. It'll open again, automated, cybernated, run by computers using just a very few men. So America is really doomed. Now, America has a problem. How do you take care of millions of people when you don't have jobs for millions of people, on one hand, and how are you going to compete in the world, on the other hand, paying the highest wages any nation pays and having the oldest, most broken down factories that any nation has. So they've got to do something. So America is really in a deplorable condition. If it wasn't for the fact that they've treated us so bad, we could sympathize with them. They are in a bad situation, and that puts us in a bad situation. Because if America falls, in a sense, we fall with it. There is no way to say that America's doomed and it's not going to affect us. It's going to affect us one way or the other. Either we're going to go along as we're going now, which means we ignore it. We pretend that it doesn't exist. Now, most black people do pretend that nothing is too different than it has been. Or you may recognize in some kind of ways that your house is less safe than it used to be. That if you stay out of your house for 2 or 3 hours at the same time every day for a week, you can expect there won't be anything there when you come back. Your next door neighbor will see to that, or the one across the street. One that's unemployed, that has to take what you have in order to survive. So we live in a difficult kind of world. It's difficult because we can not yet decide what we have to do to be able to face reality. So we say things are not that bad. They're going to get better. Maybe they will get better. But right now they're bad, and it looks like they're going to get worse. It looks like factories in America are not going to be able to do what they're supposed to do. Now, recently in the Harvard Law Review, there was an article that came out that said America's industrial system is not falling apart because American workers are lazy or they can't get enough oil or this, that. It's really because America doesn't have any intelligence in leadership positions. Now, we can say that in terms of black leadership. They talking about white leadership. They talking about how dumb the bosses in the factories are. They don't know what they're doing. All they're doing is just trying to make profit. And they've turned the factories over largely to accountants and lawyers. And accountants and lawyers don't know anything about manufacturing. All they'd rather do is just keep merging plants. Just make quick profits and get out. So we end up with a whole economy that is on the skids, that's bound to be destroyed because there is no creativity. We do not devote any money in America to development. No experimentation. So America stays behind. If America now is 100 years behind on the drawing board, they're behind in war equipment, obviously everyone knows, with Russia. Russia has developed beyond America in the last 10 years. It would take America at least 50 years to catch up with Russia in terms of military development, because military development also takes scientific research, development of scientific industrial methodology. America doesn't have it. Russia has put money in and has it. So America is way ahead in terms of industrial technology necessary for war. In the other countries, they have put money in industrial technology necessary for private industry. They have done it cooperatively in the various countries, like Japan. All the countries in Japan put money together for development, for the development of new ideas, for innovation. And so those countries are way ahead. America's way behind. Now they figure something has to be done, but they don't quite know what to do. So it's a vacuum in terms of leadership. There's very little leadership in America, anywhere. Now, it's easy for us to look around and say obviously there's no leadership in the black community. Black organizations have fallen apart. Black leaders have started talking just utter foolishness. Black churches never did talk anything but foolishness. So we can see that there is no leadership in the black community, but to look out and say there's no leadership in the white community is startling to most of you. Because you've always felt that no matter what happened in the black community, white folks would save us. No matter how foolish we acted, white folks were acting sensible, and they would work it out for us. We didn't have to worry too much. White folks would work it out for us. Now, we find it right now, like most of you find it impossible right now. You can say, I hear the words, but I don't believe it. You just don't believe that white folks can make a mistake. Well, I tell you, white folks have been making the greatest mistake in the world for at least 300 years. They have been unable to keep up They had natural raw materials, a frontier, resources. They didn't have to bother too much about having brains because they had a whole lot of material, and they wasted them. They wasted materials, and they began to destroy the country in which we live. Contamination, everything that's happening, the whole atomic energy boom is actually a bust, because all it's going to do is end up killing most of the people in America. They have atomic plants now all over America, and they're afraid to use them, because every time they turn one on, it leaks, and it leaks contamination which can destroy people within a radius of hundreds of miles. It's a very difficult kind of world that the white man has put together for himself, and his ability to deal with it is now very questionable. And as black people, we live in a world that he controls, and his inability to deal with the world that he controls means that we are in trouble. If he fails, then we have no hope, because we have nothing to take the place of his guidance and leadership and support. He does everything for it. He runs all the factories. He runs the schools. He does all the research. He does everything. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. But we have nothing to do with it. So we live in a nation and have no real part in its development or in its control. So we just have to depend on what the white man does. So we have turned into a whole race of hustlers. We just hustle the best we can. We know things are bad. When they're bad, we hustle hard, and when they're good, we hustle not quite so hard. But it's easier to hustle when things are good. It's hard hustling out there now when things are bad. Some of y'all hustlers, you know how it is out there now. It's hard to hustle when things are really bad. It's hard to hustle when somebody doesn't have much. They're going to watch. And we've got, to the place where we don't trust anybody anyway. That's a part of, being an oppressed people. Everybody's individualistic, trying to take care of himself. So you expect to be hustled. We have the acceptance of the white man's declaration of our inferiority on one hand, and individualism, which we've developed just trying to take care of ourselves on the other. And you put the two together, we are hustlers, and we're afraid of being hustled. So we are in trouble as a people. We can't work together. Now, we can say everything you said so far is true. You can say America is in trouble. Industrially, if you read anything, you know America's in trouble. Even if you look at TV, at the news, you know America's in trouble. You can say, yes, America's in trouble, but we can't do anything about it because we do not believe in our ability, in our own ability to do anything for ourselves. You believe it. You do not believe that black people could do anything together because we've had 300 years of mistrust, of hustling each other, of using trickeration. If you trick everybody before they trick you. We believe it. It's our lifestyle. Trick before you get tricked. But that doesn't mean that you're producing anything. It just means you are stealing from other people. You take from people what they have and give them nothing in return. That's trickery. That's hustling. A hustler does not expect to give anybody back the value of what he takes. When he sells you one of them watches that he wears up his arm with all them funny names on them that look almost like other names, you don't expect, if you got any sense, that you're going to get value for that piece of watch that you get. If he says he's giving you a bargain, it costs $75, but you can have it for $15. It costs $3.50. And it won't last. It won't last till you get it home. But he's smart now. He can sell 100 watches a day like that. He can sell them to anybody. Because you think you're tricking somebody else because you think he must not know what this watch costs. Because the names are written on there almost like the real name, and you don't know how they all spelled anyway. So it looks like the real watch. So he is counting on the fact that you think you're tricking him. So he lets you trick him, and he knows he's tricking you. So we got a whole society where everybody does that all the time. We're going to trick each other. We're going to trick each other any way we can. And it works out kind of difficult. Because you get a whole group of people who can't live together in any kind of way. Our organizations end up trickeration organizations. Our leaders end up trickeration leaders. Our churches end up trickeration churches. There's only one thing that's really true. In the church, the old slave church, it doesn't have the same problem that we have in Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. Because they don't tell you that everything is going to be all right, that you can do anything. In the slave church, if you remember, they don't tell it to you so straight that it's easy to remember, because it's better if you don't know exactly what you're being told. But you have to understand that in the slave church, you can accept the fact that there's sin and evil everywhere, and that you are full of sin and evil. Because Jesus died on Calvary 2,000 years ago and washed you in his blood. You washed in the blood of the Lamb and made white like snow. So all of your evil, trickeration, lying, cheating, stealing, everything else goes on, but in the end, if you have faith, you washed in the blood of the Lamb and take off to heaven. Now that's a beautiful slave religion for an oppressed people. Do whatever you want to do. Do whatever you want to do. Be evil as you want to be. And when you go in church, don't expect too much. The preacher will tell you, don't do what I do. Do what I say do. So there's no real problem in the church about the fact that people are doing just like they do out in the slave culture. Because the church, the black church, the traditional black church, is a part of the slave culture. And trickeration is a part of it, just like it is a part of the everyday slave culture out there in the street. But you don't look for perfection in a slave church, do you? No, you don't look for perfection from a slave preacher. He can do whatever he wants to do. You know that. You say, oh, man, that D show is operator. You know what you mean? That preacher can show hustle. He can tell you anything and do anything. You say, oh, they don't all do that. No, they don't all do that. But a lot of them do that. And you accept it because you don't expect any more. A slave church has motherwit, wisdom, and not asking too much. Don't say that you're coming in here into a perfect community. They don't even call it a community. When you run up and down the aisle, scream and shout, sing, do everything. You know, you've been in a slave church, right? They just do everything. Everybody just has a good time. But everybody's having it as an individual. He's trying to get to heaven by himself. He's shouting by himself, trying to get to heaven by himself, asking God and Jesus to look down on him by himself and to snatch him up for the rest of these and take him to glory when the time comes. Not right now, Lord, but pretty soon. You know, not right now. Right. So the slave church is basically different than the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church because it doesn't claim to be a community. It does not claim to be a community, and it does not claim to have a process for making people change and become better than they are. Perfectibility. It doesn't claim that. It does not say that when you join, you're going to become different. They say, when you have faith, God will save you by grace. You are saved by grace and not works. And that's a beautiful thought, isn't it? You don't have to do anything. You're saved by grace. God reached down and touched you, and you're saved. Isn't that beautiful? You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is say, I believe. God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. And they say, you are saved while yet a sinner. You are saved while yet a sinner. Now, when you come in the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church, we don't say the same thing, which makes it more difficult. You come in the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church, we tell you it is a transforming community. That means you individually are only so important as your contribution to the community of which you thereby become a part. You're part of a community. And the community presumes that it has the power to change you and ultimately then to create perfectibility, to create a community which has the power to transform people. That's entirely different. It's entirely different, and it's much more difficult to accept than to accept the belief that God can reach down and put his hand on you and change you automatically just before you die and then snatch you up to heaven. We say heaven is here on earth. Heaven is what you build here on earth. Heaven is not off in the sky someplace. Heaven is what you build right here on earth. Heaven is what we build, what the community builds, what those who have faith in their possibilities can build right here on earth. So we say the community becomes the Messiah, the anointed of God for this day. Just as Jesus was the Messiah, the anointed of God for his day. And Jesus became the Messiah when the dove, the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, came down and touched him. Then he became the Messiah. They can wonder how, with all of the facts with the Bible, all of the facts in the life of Jesus, all of the facts out of the history of the black nation Israel, how we ever got to the place where slave preachers and white preachers could talk about being washed in the blood of the Lamb and being whisked off to glory, one by one, as individuals. You can remember in the Bible, shortly after the crucifixion of Jesus, the followers of Jesus, those who believed in Jesus, lived together as a community, and they shared. Each gave as he was able and received as he had need. That's an entirely different kind of church than them sitting there waiting to be washed in the blood of the Lamb. They hoped that the community would be saved, that God would drop a new Jerusalem out of heaven, but it would be here on earth, and that God and his Spirit, his power, would reign here on earth. Now that's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. It's harder for you to believe than it is to believe that God's going to whisk you off to glory. Because God whisking you off to glory removes from you the responsibility of doing anything. As long as you can put it on God and make Jesus a God, because in the Bible Jesus was not a God except in the writings of the Apostle Paul, who never saw Jesus. Jesus was not a God. He was the anointed of God. He was anointed to do a task to help people build the kingdom of God on earth. He was the anointed of God. And that's a long way from being divine. It was way later they put in the Christmas story and the angels, the angelic choir, and all the rest of it. The basic story of the Bible is the story of Jesus being the Messiah, the anointed of God, saving mankind as a community, building God's kingdom here on earth. Now, when the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church tells you we're going to build the community of Jesus, we are going to build the community of Jesus here on earth now. The community of Jesus becomes a transforming community in which you can be changed, in which all your hustling can be changed, in which you can cease being a hustler. You say, well, I don't know. In fact, you're not even sure you would like to be changed. You're not sure you'd like to not be a hustler. You've counted on hustling so long, you'd feel kind of naked and lonesome if you weren't a hustler. The Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church said it's possible for you to come into the nation, into the community of Jesus, and to be changed. The whole process, the whole complex series of processes which make up the science of Kul, which comes from the ancient African mystery temples, the ancient universities, teach you how to change, teach you how to become what you ought to be. That was over the temples, over the entrance to the temples in Egypt, in Africa. Know thyself. Become what you already are. You were born good. You became evil because of the conditioning influences of the world in which you live. You can just say, as long as I can remember, I've been evil. As long as I can remember, I have been evil. I've been trying to hustle people and get all I could and give as little as I could. That's probably true. You've been evil as long as you can remember, but you can't remember everything. You know, it's possible that you were influenced by the evil world even before you came out of your mother's womb. They're showing studies now of the influence that the baby experiences even while in the mother's womb. Alcohol taken by the mother is very apt to make an idiot out of the child, and the child is still inside the mother's womb. Dope taken by the mother will make the baby a dope addict before the baby is born. And the first experience of life the baby has outside of its mother is going through withdrawal. So it's impossible to say, I've been evil ever since I can remember. You had evil influences on you even before you were born. And how many of those influences were able to influence you, we don't know. But we know that you were created by the influences that were all about you. God made you good. The world in which you were born made you evil. The Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church says it's possible to make you good again. Now you can say, I can make it without being good. And that's questionable. It's questionable that you can make it without being good. Now you can take a simple approach and say, I can make it because I can get a job and I can hustle on the job. You know, we're good at hustling on jobs, on people's jobs. The man pays us $125 a week and we steal $200, which makes $325 a week. You can say, I don't know nothing about all that. There ain't no use lying to me. I know. And that's not just brothers, that's sisters and everybody. They stealing on the job, trying to make ends meet. But there's still a hustling way of living. And it's possible to live without it, but it would take a group, and a group functioning as a community, to be able to live without hustling as a way of life. So we have a problem in the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church talking not only to new people who drop by and telling them that they have to change, that it's possible for them to change, that hustling wasn't born in them, they were born good, they were made evil by the world in which they live, to tell them it is possible for black people to put together a communal way of life in which they can do for themselves all the things that are necessary. And they say, I just don't believe black people can do it. And it's natural that you don't believe black people can do it, because you have never seen black people do it. You have yourself never tried to do it. And so you just don't believe black people can do it. That's one of the things that's controlling in the lives of black people, a mistrust of each other. We don't believe that black people can do anything unless a white man is in charge and telling us what to do. And then we're going to beat him if we can. But as far as a black person is concerned, we don't believe that it's possible to build a kind of world in which black people could live without dependence on white people. And you can say, what could black people do? Black people could do the simple things that are necessary. Enough black people could make their clothing, could grow their food, could process their food, could ship their food. We could have enclaves of black people with housing and all the things that are necessary all across the country and supply them from farms that we control. You say, well, how would we know that one nigger wouldn't be stealing it all from the other niggers and taking the stuff from the farm and selling it to the white folks? There ain't no way that you can prove in advance. The only way you can prove it is to try it. You know right now that the white man is taking everything and giving you the crumbs from the table. You know that. Is it possible that black people, if they had large farms across the country, would have sense enough to know that the success of the farm and the cannery and the distribution and everything else depended upon their commitment to the community adjacent, their commitment to what they were trying to do together? Is it possible that there would be some black people who would do that? I know you come into the nation, you look around, and you say, these niggas ain't all perfect. What are they talking about? Changing people. Some of them need changing. That's true. Everybody in the nation needs changing, and everybody in the nation ought to be in the constant process of being changed. There is no point at which a person can say, I have been changed, I am now perfect, and God works through me perfectly. Because you always are going to have selfish inclinations, desires to get this for yourself. That's why it's done on a communal basis and a group, with group processes, group encounters, where the group checks on what you do, where nobody is entirely unaccountable to the group. Now you can say, well, I get by all the time, and nobody ain't doing nothing about mine getting by. You're talking about in the nation, out of the nation. In the nation, we know what you're doing. We may give you enough time to find out whether it's possible to save you or not. Is it possible for you to become accountable, or is it not possible? If it is not, you've gone so far, you've been so corrupted by the world in which you live that you can't be changed, then the nation has no alternative but to expel you. Out in the world, there is no accountability. If you're stealing from the white man, the only accountability is the penitentiary. And the penitentiaries are full from coast to coast. That's the only accountability there is, because he doesn't care about you. He's not trying to change you. He's just trying to protect his profit. So out in the world, the only thing that you have that keeps you accountable is the fear of going to the penitentiary, of getting caught. But we've learned, we've grown immune, callous to the fear of getting caught. Just do it anyway. Hope we don't get caught. If we do, we go on spend a little time and know that the jails are so full they can't keep us too long. In the nation, the process is entirely different. You are engaged in the process of trying to change. You are in a group that is holding you accountable. You have encounters with the group in which they are concerned about what your problems are, why you think the way you think, why you're doing what you're doing. Now, anybody in the nation, the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church, who's not an active member of a group is already lost. No matter what the reason that they can give might be. I'm holding 2 jobs, I'm so tired, I got a child, I got this, I got that, I just don't have time. If they are in a position of leadership, there is no excuse for participating in a group, because without a group, they're gone. If they are on a moja level, which means that they are functioning basically in the culture, with a job, taking care of themselves, they still have a responsibility for their activity in the moja group to which they're assigned, because without the group participation, they'll fall apart. They'll cease to be a part of the nation. They'll cease to understand what the nation is supposed to be doing. The Pan-African Orthodox Church has a much more difficult task than the slave church, because we are trying to get people to recognize the fact that they can become better than they now are, that there is a process by which they can be changed, that the process by which they can be changed can make them able to do things that they're not now able to do. In the slave church, you don't have to change. You can say you're changed, you can call yourself a saint, but basically you're concerned with being washed in the blood of the Lamb, being saved by grace. That's the free gift of God, has nothing to do with works. And that is easier, except for one simple thing. Basically, it's not biblical. It's not based on the life of Jesus. It's not based on the Old Testament teachings of the nation Israel. It's something made up to please and satisfy the pagan world in which the Apostle Paul tried to take Christianity. So we have to understand what it is we're trying to do. And the whole thing for all of us is that each one of us then is the answer. The white world is falling apart. What black people are going to do depends on each one of us coming together, making a community, making a communal society, and doing the things that have to be done if we're going to survive. You are the answer. And you can try to make somebody else the answer. You can try to make the answer something outside of yourself, something that somebody's going to do for you. You can even try to make God the answer. But there is no answer other than you. Your ability to participate in the building of a community in which black people can live together as brothers and sisters. giving as they're able and receiving as they have need. We are dealing with the only possible solution to the black man's problem. Now, there are some black people who don't even recognize the fact that there is a problem. There's not too much you can do for them. We just go on. We just leave them. There's nothing you can do. Any black person in the world today who looks around and sees the condition of his black brothers and sisters everywhere and doesn't even see that black people have a problem, there is no hope for him whatsoever. If you see there is a problem and are looking for a solution, then you have to face the realities of the world in which you live, and the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church and the community to which we call you to come to be changed, to become a different kind of person and to have a different way of life. Now you can say, man, I can make as much hustling out here in the world as y'all can make in the nation. But you're talking about yourself as an individual. You can make something as an individual hustler. The better hustler you are, the more sophisticated hustler you are, the better you make it. And we've had some people who've learned how to hustle in the nation. They have hustled in the nation as long as they could, and then they figured, man, I got so good now, I'm going back out there in the culture and hustle. Because we will turn out slick hustlers, because if you're going to get by all of the checks and balances, encounters, the group process, everything that the nation has to check on what you're doing, if you can get by all of that, you have turned into a super-duper hustler. So you can head for the culture and do what you can do in the culture. And you probably will be able to out-hustle 9 out of 10 black people in the culture, no question about it. You'll be able to get a job that you wouldn't even think about asking for before you came in the nation. But you are still out there by yourself, and the amount of time that you can make it like that is definitely limited, because we've got to remember always the basic fact that America, the whole nation, the whole industrial system, the government, all of the systems of social services and relief, all of this, America is falling apart. America has been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Now, our problem is, what can we do as black people to protect ourselves so that by the time America has totally collapsed, that we will be able to survive through our own efforts, through the things that we do, through our own community, through our community achievements, through the things that we are putting together for ourselves. We can survive if we can put it together in time before the nation collapses. If not, we will be destroyed just like white people will be destroyed when the nation collapses, because we will be totally dependent. We'll be destroyed even before white people are destroyed, because they will fire all of us first. You can say, man, me and my boss, we get along good, but I bet you don't get along as good as he gets along with his own family, with his own son, with his own wife. And he will get rid of you and put them in your job before he'll see them starve and you continue to work. We live in very perilous times for black people, because the nation in which we live, of which we try to play like we're part, although we're excluded and on the outside, that nation is getting ready to die. You have one alternative possibility. There are no organizations left in the black community. The church in the black community no longer serves in any way the needs of black people. You have no alternative choice. Either go down with America and white people, or move into the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church and try to preserve yourself along with all other black people by building a community in which we can live, in which we can do the things that have to be done for our survival. Now, we're going to be talking about this for 3 more weeks. We just introduced it today. I know most of you find it very difficult to accept the facts. And until you accept the facts, you can't deal with, the solution. There's great resistance to believing that a nation's going to fall apart. Great resistance to believing that black people can come together and do anything that's meaningful. Now, you have to deal with those. We hope you'll come back and hear the rest of the series. We hope you'll understand that black people can change the black man's way of life here in America, even in the midst of things falling apart, because we can put together out of the things that we still have left those things that are necessary to make it possible to have a community in which we are concerned about each other, in which we are no longer hustling each other,